Welcome to another episode of the Inquisition. I'm back this week. Apologies for Valentine's Day, the 14th, and apologies to Frozen Furrow. Had a wee thing I had to take care of, but we're back now and everything is good. I hope you are all well, and I hope you have had a great weekend. I was away fishing, caught myself a wee fish. You'll see it on my page. Give it a wee like, and if you feel you need to, unfollow Penge, because I think we should try and get him back down to 200 followers where he belongs. And he's actually on time today, but I still stand by unfollowing him. Don't unfollow me, just unfollow Penge. Adrian Mac, how you doing? Alright, Celestine, alright, Paint Dude. I'm not going to accept your invites, I'm going to try and add. Please accept my invitation. We'll hopefully have you in. So today we've got on Sandman of Terror. Looking forward to having him on. He's a lore guy, so if you get any lore questions, don't hesitate in throwing them in. We'll try and get to them. And we'll hopefully get through as many questions as we can before Love Island, because as we know, something happens in Love Island tonight, and I'm partial to a bit of Love Island. And then next week, I'm pretty sure Celebrity Big Brother starts, and we all love a better Celebrity Big Brother. I'm pretty sure even Simon likes it. Alright, Inferno, how you doing? Yeah. Mate, that Frankie and Marine you done is absolutely spectacular. Right. Obviously, that didn't work. I'll add these two clowns now. Hi, Tiz. How you doing? Hope you're well. St. Celestine, how you doing? I sent you an invite, but I don't know what's happening with Instagram. So I've accepted yours. I've cancelled invites. I absolutely love Instagram for this. Every day, every time. Right, Daz Mall, how you doing, mate? Hope you're well, mate. As I say, folks, if you can, please unfollow Penge. We're trying to get him back down to 200 followers where he belongs. And we'll see what happens. Don't ask that, but isn't working? Love it. I've sent you an invite, Sandman of Terror. If you can check your invites, you should have one. Right.
Hello. Oh, hang on.
Sandman of Terror, thank you very much for joining. How you doing, mate?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing well, mate. Doing well. I'm actually doing well off of like 3 hours sleep over the weekend. I was away fishing up in Belfast. Get back today, I'm pretty tired, but I'm living off Monster and Iron Brew right now. So, right, let's try and invite you two clowns again. We'll see what
that worked finally.
We've got Steptoe's son on. Simon, how you doing?
How are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. We'll see if we can do. Maybe Instagram's just not used to Penge being on time, and that's why it's not working.
Hello, Inferno. Hello, Sandman of Terror.
Casey, hiya, nice to meet you.
Casey, you're bored. Hello, St. Celestine. Casey, you're bored.
I'm trying to add him here. I don't know what's wrong with him. Apologies, Sandman. This happens every week. Instagram's a nightmare for like letting people add like try to join chats and all that. It's like even Simon had issues with it on Wednesday. Try to get people in. It's just a nightmare sometimes. Try to add people in. So whilst I try and add Penge in, we might as well kick this off because we could be here waffling for the next 45 minutes. Try to get Penge in. You know what it's like? He lives in London, like yourself. He probably has to pay some sort of internet toll, which the Mayor of London's now introduced. You know what I mean? So we'll just track on and try and get him in. So just want to say a big thanks to Sandman of Terror. for joining us today on the Inquisition. And the way we run this, we just ask the first question and then we just see where the conversation goes. So the first standard question that we ask everybody is, what age were you when you first get into Warhammer, and what was the very first model that you painted, and how did you get into it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the first models I ever painted were Moria goblins with the Lord of the Rings Battle of Middle-earth magazines, which I think is actually pretty common. Like, I mean, a lot of people, that was a run of magazines they did in the UK, like, around 2002. And that got a lot of people into Warhammer. It was one of the best investments I think GW ever made.
And what age were you, and what drew you to the hobby, and what age were you when you first got into
so I was
it?
a big Lord of the Rings fan as a kid. They came out when I'd have been about 8 years old, something like that. And yeah, it was like, the biggest thing ever. So I got into Lord of the Rings, and then my friend Connor gave me a box of Ultramarines when, I was about 9. And then I repainted them in Size of the Emperor. When I say repainted, I mean just painted over the Ultramarines in Size of the Emperor. And Size of the Emperor is a very beautiful but difficult scheme to do that I did not do justice to. And I collected Tau as a kid. Then when I got into high school, all my friends played fantasy, so I played Bretonnians, actually, interestingly enough. And I 40k kind of fell away for fantasy, and then fantasy fell away for girls and partying and all that kind of thing. And then after university, I think I saw the Ghost Keel model, and I was like, they made a massive stealth suit, and got back into it. And the rest is history. I fell in love with the Dark Angels and reading the Heresy, and it just kept going and kept going. It was really crazy. I honestly never thought I'd get back into it. I don't know if a lot of people feel like that, but I always thought like, oh, I'm done with this. No, I'll never get back into Warhammer. And even when I started getting back into it, I was like, oh, well, I'll paint like one model. I'll see if I can paint now, because I can never paint as a kid. So I was like, oh, so I'll give it a go now. And then it just kept going. And then I was like, I'll check out a couple of the books. And then before you know it, it's, so much time has passed. And now we're here.
So we've got Nubicron in the chat. Nubicron is our faithful shade thrower. So you'll see a lot of shade being thrown by Nubicron to everybody and anybody, whether it be in chat or the co-host or the guest. He doesn't care. He's a Night Lords fan, so you just know he's like an emo Batman fan.
Hey, don't hate. You can't hate on the Dark.
He's also a massive Tau player, and he hates Dark Angels, so you just really confused him. Which is why he said he was about to say Wu Tau Gang, and then you said Dark Angels. So you just really he's conflicted now. Whether he likes you or hates you, he doesn't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I play things that get memed on a lot. Apparently, that's the factions that I choose. I remember when I got back into 40k, I actually lived in Hong Kong at the time, and I remember I was playing somebody with my Tau. My mum had sent me my Tau to Hong Kong, and a guy I played called me a weeb, and I'd never heard this word before. I was like, what does that mean? And I go home and I Google this word, so I message him later, like, I'm not a weeb.
No, Shane is a massive weeb. If you look up weeb in the dictionary, you find the face, Unicorn's face. He's that big of a weeb. He is a massive, but he'll admit he's a weeb, to be fair.
Yeah.
So, what do you still dabble in Tau, or did you just decide that was enough, and then just kind of left it then?
Sorry, say again. I think cut out for me.
Sorry. So do you still dabble in the Tau, or have you decided that that's the weakness is just not strong with you now?
So I have 4 armies. So I play the Dark Angels Tau, I play Black Legion, and I play Genestealer cults. Out of those, Genestealer cults probably the only army that don't get a lot of stick online. But I just I only have 4 armies, but they're all very large. So my Tau, all of my armies are about, really not the Genestealer cults, but they're also, the Genestealer cult range is just quite small. So I probably have everything maxed out for the GSE, but that is probably about 6k points. And then you have like Brood Brothers and stuff, technically. But but then for everything else, it's, 10k or pushing 10k. They're very substantial armies, and I just continually add to them. I will buy all the new Crew stuff. I'm buying all the Dark Angel stuff as it comes out. Kind of can't stop myself really. It's, I'm talking to the same people, so we're all like this.
So, Nubicraz just said your high quality lore vids make up for your bathrobe army, it makes it acceptable. But then I think you might just have broken him again because he also likes Genestealer cults, but he doesn't like Black Legion. So I can see Shane's very conflicted in the chat right now.
Well, yeah, well, that's the way of chaos, isn't it?
So, if we had to ask you what your favourite of those four armies is it like choosing between your favourite children, or have you got a clear favourite?
I do have a clear favourite, and it is the Dark Angels. I think, there's one of the first Dark Angels books that I read was Descent of Angels, and that was a really interesting book for me because it's a book that a lot of people typically don't like. It's a book you can kind of just skip if you're not interested in the Dark Angels at all. But I read it and I fell in love with the Dark Angels. I love the idea of Caliban. I thought that was the most interesting world I'd ever visited in 40k. And I was like, if they were going to have a video game set in 40k, then the world of Caliban is just fascinating. It's just such an interesting idea. And then when they became a legion, I was like, that's so cool. Like, I love these guys, and I remember the Dark Angels actually being released as a kid, and I did always think they were cool, like the Dark Angels in robes. I call them bathrobes. It's so harsh. Like, Space Marines in robes just looks cool. I don't get how you can't accept it. This is the fundamental fact of the universe. But yeah, I just fell in love with it. And then the lion's writing is like weirdly all over the place. But then when you put it all together, the thing is about the lion, and people have I think if people have started to clock onto this now that we've had Lionel Ellis Johnson, Son of the Forest, but it's made him this incredibly complex character. He has far more depth to him than I think any of the other Primarchs, realistically. If you compare him to Gilliman has the exact same role in 40k. He has literally the same job that he has in 40k and 30k. It doesn't change. His reaction to Faith in 40k was exactly what we thought it would be. No one really knows what the Lion is going to do about Faith in 40k. But it's everything about the Lion is kind of there's a lot of background to his character.
I have to admit that I think the Lion in 30k a little bit meh, but the Lion in 40k, as you say, he feels like he's gone on a journey. And he's completely different. So much so that I don't play Dark Angels, but I have a built Lion on the shelf. Nice. And Boltstorm Wargaming, our sponsors, see, I'll slip that in there, Dunk. They've got a Deathwing Assault box set in there, and it's still on the shelf. And I was in today doing a one-page rules day, and I just was staring at it, thinking, should I? No, I shouldn't. I want to. So yeah, I think the new law for the Lion and the way that what impacts are going to have on the Imperium, how the Dark Angels is going to be affected with the Primarch coming back, how's he going to deal with? Obviously, you've got the Risen, who used to be, some of them have fallen. How are they going to adapt to that? I think that for me has drawn me in a little bit. Speaking from someone who does. You do obviously really good lore videos. You're a relatively big channel on YouTube. How do you think it's going to go? Which way do you think that the Dark Angels is going to go?
So, yeah, we've had quite a few pretty big Dark Angels plot lines recently introduced. So, how big are you guys on spoilers in this live stream? Can I do spoilers?
Yeah. Okay. I don't care with it.
So this is a very big spoiler for the Siege of Terra, just in case anybody doesn't want it. So in the Siege of Terra, one of the big changes that they made to the lore was that the Dark Angels were brought in to defend Terra. Well, some of the Dark Angels were. So there's a bit of conflicting in the numbers, but in one book it says there were 10,000 Dark Angels under Causeway. In another book it actually says over half of the Dark Angels made it to Terra. This is just the writers conflict in numbers all the time, 40k. Anyway, a decent number of them, and they have a very important role. That role is to get the Astronomicon up and working, and that eventual mission actually gets the Astronomicon up and working, and it provides the Emperor with the additional strength that he needs to utterly destroy Horus Lupercal, or at least kill him. Depends. It's up for debate whether he's been destroyed. But that plot line is very centered around two characters. And these characters are Corswain and Zahariel. Zahariel is the Lord Cypher at the end of the Horus Heresy. And Corswain is the person that I think probably will become Cypher in 40k. Because Cypher in 40k and 30k are complete opposites. Zahariel is not just like a traitorous space marine. He is a very evil, meets the line and loathes everything about him. Whereas Corswain is someone that's incredibly loyal to the line and is has this very unique relationship with the Primarch and probably one of the most beloved Dark Angels characters. And it looks like what Dan Abnett is working towards is this ultimate reveal of which one of these two characters is going to end up as Cypher, because we don't know. What we do know is that according to Luther, those two characters will finally duel during the destruction of Caliban, and that will probably reveal who Cypher is in 40k. Now, there's that storyline. Of course, now that the Lion is back, he's actually searching for Luther. And one of the things that we know that he does, he goes into Luther's chamber where Luther was imprisoned for 10,000 years, and he kind of meditates. And he's using that forest walking ability to travel throughout Imperium Nihilus. He's a true knight now. He's just going on quests, killing Chaos Champions, will pop up somewhere else, kill a Swarm Lord, pop up somewhere else, kill a Tau Commander. And he uses this ability to kind of aid the Imperium. And the one thing about this, a complete change from his character in 40k and 30k, is he has no desire to lead now. He has no desire to kind of supplant Rabute Gilliman. Whereas if you go back to his life, his kind of attitude in 30k, he's even before the concept of a War Master is a thing, he's always talking about, someone is going to have to lead the Primarchs, and that someone should be me. Like now he's completely changed. So we've got those two big storylines, and at a certain point, he's obviously going to have to meet with Rabute Gilliman, which is going to be huge in and of itself. The first Primarch reunion, or Loyalist Primarch reunion that we know of in 40k, and also his reunion with the Space Wolves is going to be fascinating. There's a book called Wolf Time, which encompasses the meeting of the Space Wolves and Rabute Gilliman. And the Space Wolves hate Gilliman in that novel. They're very, very rude to him. And what's interesting about that is Gilliman, he did kind of break up the legions, but the Space Wolves kind of still do their own thing. But they hate, they're so antagonistic towards Gilliman in that novel. However, the last time someone like Bjorn the Fell-Handed saw Lionel Johnson, the Lion had just stabbed his Gene Father through the chest. So there's going to be an immediate confrontation there, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes down. And the Lion's charisma is going to be tested in that moment to see can he actually encourage the Space Wolves to put their hatred aside, because it is, maybe one of the most famous rivalries in 40k.
I'm sorry, but see now that I was listening to your Horus Heresy in 9 minutes video yesterday when I was fishing, and I'm sorry, but you can't say Rabute Gilliman. You just need to call him Rabute Gorilla Glue, or whatever you called him in that video, because honestly, that was just so funny. I actually still laugh out loud when you say, I'm not going to try and pronounce your name properly because no one else does. And then
I did a video once that I really enjoyed, where every time I said his name, I said a different version of his name. Because no one ever, everybody says his name wrong. And it's funny, it's one of those names where, and there's a few things like this in Warhammer 40k, where the names that they use or the words that they use have, real world examples of them, or they're taken from real world examples. However, Games Workshop and Black Library don't pronounce them how they're pronounced in real life. So Rabute is like a French name, which would be Reboot. But officially that is wrong. Games Workshop actually released a video being like, nah, screw you guys, it's Rabute. And that's just the most English thing I think we can do.
We've got a few questions. Sorry, we've got a few questions in the chat, but before we go through them and I hand you over to Dunk, I was just wanting to know, I'm a massive Custodes fan, and I'm quite new to your channel. I don't watch a lot of lore vids, but Casey and Dunk recommended you, and obviously from the show I started watching, and I really like the Yellow King stuff, where obviously Constantine Valdo has been revealed as the Yellow King. Do you think he's going to come back to the Imperium? What do you think he's going to do? And probably this is off the wall, but what I really want to happen, will GW bring out an army for him? Because I really want them to.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the things we know about him the King in Yellow, is that he has a very large army and a very devastating army, and he is said to be the most powerful person in the Imperium, even more powerful than the High Lords of Terror. Now, he doesn't technically exist within the Imperium, but the comparison still makes sense. Now, I will say this timeline technically takes place like 500 or so years before the current 40k timeline. So exactly when he'll be introduced, we don't know. But the nature of his army suggests that it cannot be a model range in 40k. That will make more sense once you read the book. It just wouldn't work as an army in and of itself. However, I still think it will be brought up in the books. He's got an army for a very specific purpose. The purpose for it was again revealed, I believe, in the End of the Death, Volume 3. It's about in a recent video. But I definitely think it is going to be massively impactful. So I think Constantine Valdor's main role, and this is just a theory, Constantine Valdor's purpose is going to be in the creation of the Star Child. So the Star Child is actually kind of a legacy storyline from Warhammer 40k that they're bringing back in. And the idea is that there is the Emperor's soul in the warp, and that, or part of the Emperor's soul in the warp, and that part will be reborn to a child. That's what it was. In the current 40k storyline, the difference is this. So when the Emperor went to face Horus Lupercal, finally on the Vengeful Spirit, there's a whole storyline around him attempting to ascend to godhood before he actually puts that power aside and goes to face Horus as a man. But when the Emperor relinquishes his divinity, he actually lets go of a part of his soul. He lets go of the part of his soul that contains all of his love, loyalty, and compassion, because he knows that not only would that hamper him from killing his own son, but it would also torture him over however long he would be interred on the Golden Throne, which he has seen as a possibility. And so he's let a part of his soul go into the warp, and Malkador sees it go. And Malkador recognizes that this part of the Emperor's soul is going to go into the warp and grow and grow and grow as more people believe in the Emperor's divinity, just as the Chaos Gods grow in power as they get more and more believers. Now, as we get into 40k, this part of the Emperor's soul has reached like critical mass. It is phenomenally powerful. And Gilliman is very concerned that the Emperor is intervening in the galaxy in drastic ways. Although we don't have a Legion of the Damned model range in 40k, in the books they're appearing all the time. And in the books, things like saints are coming far more apparent. And so this part of the Emperor's soul has reached critical mass. And now we find out in the book Throne of Light, which is part of the Dawn of Fire series, which is like the main storyline books of 40k, we find out that the Word Bearers Legion, they are very concerned because they have foreseen that this Star Child is nearly upon us. So there is going to be a child in 40k that's going to be born somewhere, and that will have the Emperor's soul they will have the Emperor's soul within them, and they will have this ancient knowledge and incredible power. And one of Constantine Valdor's things is he takes these beings called blanks, and blanks are soulless beings. They have like a pariah gene, and they're soulless. They're important plot device in 40k novels often. And one of the things Constantine Valdor has been doing is taking grails, which are luminous warp entities, kind of like demons, but they're big and white. And he puts them into these blanks. So he has been practicing taking like warp entities and putting them into bodies. That to me is very similar to the idea of the Star Child. And so I think that is what Dan Abnett is working towards.
But do you think as well, like, because like I'm a big Grey Knights fan, right? Do you think that they'll have some sort of like kind of going with, could Valdor potentially take them over, because they're really quite powerful psychic wise, so you're going to need a kind of really strong psychic presence to help when the Emperor comes back. Do you think that maybe because obviously Games Workshop are revamping a lot of the models, because there seems to be, with the Primaris Marines coming in, the kind of Grey Knights were kind of left in the background. We need to find an avenue for them. So do you think with this narrative that this could potentially lead into the Grey Knights becoming more like the Emperor's bodyguard and Valdor's army?
I think there is a good chance the Grey Knights will appear in the final Beckwin novel where this happens. And the reason for that is because there's a very popular Grey Knight character called Hyperion, who was a boy that was present in the Ravenous series. Now, Hyperion's very popular because he destroys the Black Blade of Angron. It's where you might have heard of him. And I think there's a good chance because, so in the Beckwin novel, where they find out that Constantine Valdor is the King in Yellow, they're also, the members of the Inquisition that know this are completely outmatched. Valdor is so much more powerful than them. Like, there's going to have to be some massive plot contrivance to stop them being almost immediately destroyed in the next novel. As soon as Valdor knows his identity has been revealed, he's like, the resources of Valdor are insane in the books. And so, yeah, they're massively outgunned. And so it would make sense for me to kind of bring maybe Hyperion back into the storyline and the Grey Knights, because they also kind of, they kind of live in this world of secrecy. So I think there's a chance they'll bring the Grey Knights in. I will say generally, totally, I get what you're saying. The Grey Knight range is looking a little bit worse from where a friend of mine plays Grey Knights, and he sent me a picture of a strike marine next to a squat, and he was smaller, and I was like, that's a bit sad. And so I think that they're definitely going to get a range refresh. Interestingly, narratively, they're kind of fine because, as you know, I'm sure you guys are aware, in the books, like the Grey Knights, sometimes they have some bit like some funny moments, but generally they are absurdly powerful. Caldor Drago famously is completely bonkers. So yeah, I don't actually think they need like any power buffs or anything, but it will be interesting to see what their place is in the overall 40k story arc. It would make sense to kind of bring them in into multiple storylines, to be honest.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come back to some lore questions later, because we could talk lore forever, but I'll actually want to ask you some more questions about yourself, if that's okay.
Yeah,
before we go back on some lore questions, because the chat's getting absolutely bombarded with lore questions about Necrons and God knows this and God knows that. So you said earlier on that you went to Hong Kong. What took you to Hong Kong? Was that through work or studying?
Yeah, I was working there. So my girlfriend, her family lives in Hong Kong. Well, just her dad does now. But yeah, they used to live in HK. And so after uni, I didn't really know what to do. And so I was like, yeah, I'll go to Hong Kong for a bit. It's basically how it went down. So I taught there for a little bit, and then lived there for about a couple of years and came back.
And was there a big Warhammer scene over there? Did you slide straight into it, or was it quite...
No, it was actually pretty good
there.
Yeah, I mean, I've only ever lived in, I've lived in a couple of places when I played Warhammer, but only London and Hong Kong for like a significant period of time. And like London obviously is kind of another level because there's so many people here. But yeah, it was pretty healthy, and there was plenty of people to play with, and London I think kind of tends more towards like a competitive scene more easily, because typically people match what they go up against, if you know what I mean. So like, if one person in your group is more competitive, that would typically bring up everyone else, because everyone's like, oh, I don't want to get my ass kicked again, and so everyone ends up tilting that way. So Hong Kong I think was much more casual. We used to do a lot more like 3-on-3s and just like random missions and things where like you do this was back in the day, so you'd have like sandbox rules in the rule books, do you know what I mean? And so like it would be like everyone can take one character and just make it completely nuts, and then we do more like silly games like that. But yeah, it was a really healthy community.
And see, with your YouTube channel, like there's a lot of lore people out there. What got you into doing the lore yourself? Because there's so much out there, but like, what got you into it yourself? Was it just more for your own like interest?
Yeah, like kind of classic. It was kind of over lockdown. Weirdly, I waited till after like the COVID was on their way out before I started, which was, I wish I'd started earlier, because everyone that started before COVID obviously just kind of shot up in subscribers because everyone was getting into 40k at the time. But yeah, I think probably the main thing that kind of kicked me over the edge was the book Saturnine. Saturnine was one of my favorite books Games Workshop have ever produced, also by Dan Abnett, and it is pure, like, if I can say this, Space Marine porn. It is just wall to wall, awesome Space Marine and Primarch moments. It was just fantastic. So that book was so great, and I genuinely just wanted to talk about it. And so I started the channel.
So like I watched a lot of your videos. Like I go through a rotation where I'll watch various videos over and over and over again. So like, I watched your Iron Man video. Is it Iron Man? The Iron
Men of Iron?
Warriors? No. The Men of Iron. Aye, Men of Iron. Fucking Iron Man. I watched the Men of Iron video there yesterday and I was on the bank. How long did it take for like the research to go into a video like that that's like 19, 20 minutes long?
So normally, so it depends how I want to approach a video, I think. With that video, that took like a reasonable amount of time to research and like looking into things, because I had recently read a book called Gene Father, which was the thing that inspired the making of that video, because there's a Men of Iron adjacent plot device in that. And so then I was like, okay, well, where else do the Men of Iron appear in 40k? And I was like, okay, we've got Blackstone Fortress, and we've got Gaunt's Ghosts, and I'd already read those, so that was fine. But then the other problem is, I'm like, oh wait, is there anywhere else? And I've read a lot of 40k, but I haven't read all 500 or so whatever books. So I was like, oh god, I hope I don't miss anything. But yeah, actually, so yeah, some of it, yeah, it vary. My videos vary quite a lot. But yeah, sorry, I've kind of gone off there. But yeah, it varies quite a lot with me. Sorry, it's quite a bad answer.
So does it just like, do you rely on your memory like for things that you remember, and then you can go and check it in a particular book, or do you just like Google Men of Iron and then like come up? Or you relying on?
It's a secret that I use. I generally, to help myself out, I will often try and choose topics where I know the core lore is centered around like max 3 books, because then it's like, okay, I'm not going to get caught out. But the Men of Iron was like a little bit tricky. It's like technically, like they could throw some random Men of Iron lore into like a random Black Templars novel, and then I'd be like, ah, crap. Yeah. But like normally, I would try to pick things that are relatively centered. Write a few novels.
So I'm just going to try and catch up with some of the chat. There are lore questions in the chat. There's also a few funny questions, I guess, off-the-wall questions, but we're loving off-the-wall question in here. So I'm going to scroll right back up because we missed quite a few. So the chat did go a bit mental. I'm trying to go back up. We keep scrolling back again. So Casey starts it off with, what is your favourite chicken shop, and why is it Morley's, and what is your standard Morley's order?
3-piece meal. I'm a simple guy if I was going to do chicken. Yeah. Sorry.
Shane says he wants to see Space Wolves start a war with Dark Angels like they did against the Grey Knights. So do you think that's maybe on the cards in the lore, or because there is obviously a bit of animosity between those two chapters?
So there's actually quite a big scene in the Heresy where Guilliman and the Lion meet. And Guilliman and the Lion have a very kind of deep relationship. Like, we weirdly get more lore on those two Primarchs interacting than I think any other Primarch relationship. It's surprisingly in depth. And when they meet in the novel, it's quite a memorable scene. And I have a strong suspicion when they meet in 40k, it will parallel that scene. And one of the things that happens in that scene is that there are some members of the Space Wolves there. And whenever the Dark Angels run into the Space Wolves, they have to do an honor duel. When in that scene, when they do an honor duel, the Lion actually accepts the duel himself because he kind of wants to get on with business. So he just dodges this attack from a Space Wolf, then just knocks him out. And it's a bit of a dick move, but he's just, he's like, he's just been a dick. It's 30k Lion. And it's very fun. And I have a theory that the reunion with the Lion and Guilliman in 40k will mirror that scene. So whereas in 30k, the Dark Angels are just showing off, and the Lion's incredibly up himself, etc., I think now the Dark Angels will come in. They'll still be fantastic and shiny, but I think the Lion will be fun, warm. He'll be very happy to see Guilliman, and it'll be kind of much more wholesome moment. However, I still think the Wolves will be there, and we will get another honor duel. And my guess is that we will get like Bjorn the Fell-Handed having an honor duel against the Lion. That's what I would guess, but it's pure guess. But yeah, I think that the only thing that the Lion will do to sate the Space Wolf's anger, which I think will inevitably come, will be his kind of promise or an announcement of his quest to go and find the Wolf King. So one of the things that the Lion has is this forest walking ability that you might have heard of. And this forest walking ability allows him to traverse great distances, and it keeps taking him to like wherever he's needed. It's kind of like the TARDIS in 40k almost. Sorry, yeah. And yeah, so he keeps doing that. And also, and Primarchs also have like strong bonds. And the bond between the Lion and the Wolf is actually really strong. But Lehman Russ and Lionel Johnson actually end on really good terms in 30k in the Scouring. But yeah, I think there's a good chance the Lion would probably try and use that bond to find Lehman Russ at some point. I don't necessarily think it will be in like the immediate future, but I think the beginning of some sort of quest to find the Wolf King will bring the Space Wolves round.
Casey also asked, Sandman of, so he said, Sandman of Terror is your username because your favourite song is Darude Sandstorm. But a serious question, where did the name come from?
So the Sandman is my real name is Sandylands in real life. I'm a real person, I promise. And so I have that, and then I had like Sandman, and literally, you know, I was just Sandman for a while, and then I love Sandman or Sandman 40k. The problem was it's quite hard to find that because obviously Sandman, I haven't sued them yet, but Marvel used that name, and of course Netflix used that name, so it was very hard to find the channel. And so I was playing around with things for a while, and eventually I just picked Of Terror because I thought it was just kind of funny, and I just like the idea that obviously we're all, I assume, born on Terra, so it was just like a joke, a poor joke, but that fits my MO pretty well.
So Shane's also come in with it. It's a conversation me and Shane have had personally, to be honest. He still thinks the Grey Knights versus Custodians will be a thing. He still believes that Malkador's Terminus Decree is basically switching the Emperor off so that he can be reborn. Now, I have seen that theory before. We've discussed it, where the Grey Knights are basically they've got like a decree to go and kill the Emperor, so obviously he's a perpetual, so he can come back, and obviously the Custodians are sworn to protect him. Can you see that maybe being a storyline in the future?
Sorry, but no is the answer to that question. So the Terminus Decree is a big plot line in the Siege of Terra, the creation of it. So we actually kind of know what it is. I believe it's called like the Terminus Sanction in the novel, but it's the Terminus Decree, and we know what it does. It is very, very powerful. It's completely insane as a plot device. But yeah, so it's not killing the Emperor. There is the Talisman of Seven Hammers, which is like creation of Vulcan, which would destroy the throne and take Terra with it, which is kind of similar to that theory. But yeah, I don't think that will happen. I think that, yeah, the whole killing, could you kill the Emperor and then he'll be reborn, I think is one of those things that the writers don't even know. And I think they probably admit that. It's never been decided what would happen. The truth is that we don't know how that will go down. Maybe even the Emperor has thought it's a possibility, but he doesn't want to risk it. Because the problem is, you could kill the Emperor, then the time it takes to do that, would demons overwhelm the Imperial Palace? How long would it take for the Emperor to properly regenerate? Would it take a very long time? What would happen in that time frame? You know, would it be an absolute disaster for the Imperium? So the truth is that it might actually be a feasible thing. And there are characters in 40k, we know, that have thought about doing this. But we just, yeah, the reason the Custodians can never let it happen is because, you know, it could doom the entire world. And therefore the astronomical would be lost. Saint
Celestine says, Sandman, do you think the Necron, this is a really deep question, Sandman, do you think the Necrons hold the key to defeating chaos if Dax Mechanicus can harness the shard on Mars to control them?
Well, you guys had Graham McNeil on, actually, didn't you? I would love to ask Graham McNeil what's going on with that. Because so one of the things that happens regarding the Void Dragon on Mars is at the end of the book Mechanicum, which is relatively early on in the Heresy, we find out that there's a new guardian of the Void Dragon on Mars, and that will last for about 10,000 years. And after that point, the Void Dragon might wake up and kind of get out. So we've reached that point in 40k. So the question is that plotline going to come back up? So it may be a plotline in the future. Exactly when, I don't know. But that could happen. Can the Necrons defeat chaos? Almost certainly. That is basically their aim. The problem is that their plan to defeat chaos kills almost all of us as well, because it would sever our connection to the warp, and even non-psychers have a connection to the warp in terms of their like souls. So yeah, I assume blanks and pariahs would survive it, but pretty much everyone else would die. And so they would beat chaos, but they'd also beat us. However, they need a lot more Blackstone to pull this off.
But would they not need to kill the Eldari as well? Was it not the Eldari that basically formed the warp?
Sorry, say again.
Would they not have to also kill all the Eldari? Because was it not really the Eldari that formed the warp in the first place, or formed the first Chaos Gods?
The great Spanish.
Yeah, they did create Slanesh. It would kill the Eldari, although the Eldari would probably flee the galaxy long before this happens, I reckon. Because it would what they would do is they basically create the Pariah Nexus, but it would be far, far larger, would be their plan.
So we've got a bit of beef in the chat between our very own Duncan Shane, and I must admit on Shane's side in this, being a Custodes fan. He says the Grey Knights would get ruined by the Custodes, to be fair, and obviously Duncan objects to that. How, just out of a bit of fanfic, how do you think that conflict would go?
It's a very tough call. It would depend very much on who is writing it. I think I'd have to give it to the Custodians. The Custodians, I would say, are kind of the ultimate warriors of the Imperium, and they have the Aegis of the Emperor, which grants them psychic protection, and that comes up a few times in the novels. So I know it's not a big thing in the game, but it is a thing in the books, I think, but that's much more prominent. And yeah, so I got to give it to the Custodians, sorry. But, like, there's absolutely a scenario. Like, Howard or Drago, for example, can take on Mortarion in one novel. So, like, it's like the Grey Knights have, they are essentially limitless, and they were created long after the Custodians. So we don't know what their true, upper level is.
I think Valerian in it's Watchers of the Throne, his assessment of Grey Knights is they're faster and stronger than normal Space Marines, but not quite as fast and as strong as he is.
Yeah.
So because he was assessing them when they were defending the Walls of Terror against the Demon Incursion.
Yeah.
But to be fair, Aaliyah was there, so she's a psychic null, so she was slowing them down a little bit as well.
It's true, yeah.
But he did mention as well that even though she was slowing them down, were still fighting really hard and even resisting her and still fighting through. So I think it would be a very, very close fight. But like I've been Shane about this conversation again. My argument's always been there's 10,000 Custodians. I don't think there's 10,000 Grey Knights. So the numbers are on the Custodians.
Yeah.
Just before I hand you over to Doug, we've got two more similar questions from Casey and Shane. Casey says, did Magnus do anything wrong? And then Shane's tipped in with, did Kurz do anything wrong? Kurz did nothing wrong, and that's his legit opinion after reading his Primarch book. So what do you think of that question and that statement?
So Magnus did do things wrong, but I actually have quite a bit of sympathy for Magnus. So in the things that Magnus does wrong, he absolutely kind of messes up. It's been a long time since I read 1,000 Suns, but I am pretty certain in that novel, again, Graham McNeill, pretty sure, he has the vision of Horus turning against the Emperor before the Edict of Nicaea for the first time. And although it's not as easy as him just kind of like grabbing a moment with his dad, he doesn't seem to try nearly hard enough to warn his father about this betrayal. And what's very interesting about Magnus is that he has a huge level of arrogance. So one of the things that Magnus has already done is cure the 1,000 Suns, or at least he believes he has at the time, cure the 1,000 Suns of their affliction because they suffer from horrific mutations. However, it's always been implied in the lore that the reason Magnus could do this was because he drew power from Tzeentch, and in exchange he lost his eye. That's why he's the Cyclops. And that suggests to me that the only thing you could possibly draw from that is that Magnus must have known that he's not the most powerful being in the Great Ocean. And so therefore to be as confident as he was that nothing could ever manipulate or outplay him seems incredibly foolhardy. However, the one thing about Magnus that I think is very redeeming is that he does love his sons very dearly. And the other thing is, in his Primarch novel, there's a conversation between the Emperor and Magnus. And the Emperor actually says to Magnus that, I can't remember the exact wording, but he basically says something like, you know, I want you to kind of be better than me. I want you to be more than I am and go further than I am. And so the idea that Magnus is pretty confident that he can do things that even the Emperor hasn't attempted actually makes sense, because that's kind of what the Emperor said to him in private, personally. So I do have a lot of sympathy there. I can understand why he has the arrogance he does, but objectively, I think he is quite arrogant.
But would that not be because the Emperor's very manipulative himself, so he's playing on his egotistical nature? Because he obviously wanted him to sit in the throne and basically use him as a puppet for the Golden Throne himself. So really, is the Emperor not just manipulating? He's basically manipulated all his sons with their flaws, which would be their egos.
I mean, absolutely.
To make them what
absolutely. Yeah, the Emperor is constantly, he's terrible at that. He's constantly manipulating his sons. Yeah. As regarding Kurz is quite an interesting one, because he is insane, of course, which is in and of itself quite forgiving. And he has this, you know, he is horrifically tortured. Kurz's biggest failing, and I don't think you can really put this down to insanity, but like his biggest failing is his belief that the future is set. It's kind of like the core difference between himself and Sanguinius, although Sanguinius kind of falls prey to this idea so at certain times. However, one thing I always thought that was really interesting about Kurz, there's a part just before his death where he has, before he dies, Konrad Kurz creates an effigy of the Emperor, and this effigy actually then talks to him. And it's up to you to decide as the reader whether you believe this was really the Emperor. Personally, I like to believe it was. And one of the things that it says to Kurz is that if Kurz and the Emperor could have met one final time, Kurz would have been cured of his insanity. And that should have happened. Kurz should have met the Emperor one final time. The reason he didn't was because Sanguinius ejected him into space and never gave him the opportunity of being cured by the Emperor. Although Sanguinius probably didn't know this at the time. But in theory, Konrad Kurz should have had a redemption on Terra, and potentially we could have seen another loyalist Primarch during the siege.
So, and you're, as well know, Big E basically puts his vision of himself into you. So everybody sees Big E differently. What do you think Big E's true form is? Because not even Malkador knows what he looks like. But what do you think he looks like?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's interesting. So Malkador does say that. He says that nobody has ever seen his true form. There's a couple of people who might have done. So, of course, the Sisters of Silence see him, looks like an old man when they look at him. And that's, you know, there's probably some truth in that. And the other person is Corvus Corax in Deliverance Lost, when Corvus originally meets the Emperor. As, you know, the Emperor comes down, he just looks like a normal guy. And then reality switches, and all of a sudden he turns into this big golden monster. So, yeah, I think potentially Corvus and the Sisters of Silence have seen this true version of the Emperor. But my personal favorite, I hope we get some art for someday, when the lion looks at the Emperor, he wears like massive emerald armor, which is quite cool. I also thought it was interesting. But the lion won't look the Emperor in the eye, I don't think.
And I was going to ask now, I had a fucking belter question as well, but I can't remember it. Man, it's such a... Oh, yeah, so what's been your favourite in the Siege of Terra books? I'm on the very last book, and I'm at the bit where the Emperor's just been staked to the throne beside Horus, and some guy trying to use a knife to, well, basically the Emperor's sword to chop him off this throne. What's been your favourite moment of the Siege of Terra books?
When Corswain turned up, that was a hell of a moment. My favourite moment, yeah. There's a lot of good moments. I think one of the things I've really liked about the Siege of Terra is that they didn't like subvert expectations for subversion's sake, which is something that I think a lot of writers on TV shows and stuff do all the time. Whereas like, oh, you didn't expect it to go down like that. Like, you know, there was a lot of like random theories of like, oh, maybe Sanguinius actually does kill Horus, and it's like, well, like, I mean, yes, it would be shocking, but does it actually serve any purpose to the story, for example? And so I quite like that they stuck to, the classic fights like the Emperor versus Horus were great. Probably the Saturnine Gambit is my favorite moment of the Heresy. I just adored that scene and everything about it. And at the same time, Dawn takes on Fulgrim. So it's it's some of the most fun I've ever had reading a 40k book. Definitely.
One of my favorite moments, and I've said it before, is when there's some Death Guard and they're quite a distance away from Mortarion, and he's got a wee nerdling on his shoulder, and the fog lifts for a split second, and the Death Guard, I can't remember the character's name, is horrified by this nerdling on his shoulder, but then the fog comes back down on him, and then he sees how cute it is. I think for just maybe like 4 or 5 lines, or maybe a paragraph, that was a great bit of writing that it just shows that all the Death Guard, every single Marine's manipulated into seeing what they want to see, and I thought that was actually a really, really good wee detail. And there's been really good moments throughout the Siege of Terra books I've found with wee nuggets like that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, they're all over those. I think all the legions got their day in the books, which was a really nice little detail. And yeah, there was so much that they had to kind of work in to the siege, and explain how Abaddon, Perturabo, are going to go through these transitions. The Death Guard, as you say they were actually kind of retconned. They weren't supposed to have fallen by this point. They moved the date back so they would be, followers of Nurgle by the siege, and so they have to deal with the fallout of that. And Magnus and Mortarion have like a bit of a interaction around that kind of thing. And it was crazy. Yeah, they fit in a lot. It was very impressive and very well thought through, I thought.
And what are you working on yourself, like painting wise? Is there any figures that you're working on this now?
So I'm actually I've gotten quite into Heresy recently. So I've been painting some Dark Angels for Horus Heresy, which has been a lot of fun. And I'm buying all the Dark Angel stuff, so painting those as well. But I've actually been really enjoying. I want to get actually good at the airbrush. That's one of the things I want to try and do this year, because I feel like it would massively change how I paint things if I was actually good with one of those. And you see people all the time like have these armies and they're like, oh, that was 5 minutes with the airbrush. It always looks very good to me. So I'm like, I want to just get to that level. That would be good.
What annoys me sometimes though is that when you see a really good painted miniature on Instagram or YouTube, and it goes follow the link for a guide, and it's like the first 6 or 7 minutes is brush painting, and you're thinking, oh yeah, man, it's just I can achieve this, and then the next step they pull out the airbrush, and you're like, and it's just like
I will say
airbrushing the shit out of it.
You can kind of make up the gap with dry brushing. Dry brushing is one of the things I've kind of learned a lot of the last year. Is the people that are really good at dry brushing can they don't need an airbrush. They can kind of do whatever.
Casey just popped. He's had the magic word. If you say airbrush more than 3 times, Casey pops up, and there you go. Airbrush. You say Casey's got an airbrush. If he was on the stream, he would have told you got an airbrush within the first 5 seconds of the stream, because someone's got an airbrush. They'll tell you. Anyway, right. So. My last sort of lore question before we move on to the more casual questions, because obviously we're not far away from Love Island now, and we can't keep Dunk away from Love Island. So it's sort of a joke question, but also sort of a lore question. Now, with you being a Black Legion fan and a bit, Abaddon, is he a loser, or is this all part of his cunning plan?
Oh, he's so not a loser. I hate it so much. I feel so bad for Abaddon. He's actually such a good character in the novels. He goes through this massive character arc, and I love Aaron Dembski-Bowden's writing of Chaos. I think that the Night Lords and the Black Legion are written really well in those books. It's like the background behind the 13 Black Crusades has been explained so many times, but they'll never have to stop explaining it, because everybody believes that he just failed the 13 Black Crusades. Poor Abaddon, Abaddon. But like honestly, if you really hate the character, give the Black Legion series a try. If you still hate Abaddon, I will be surprised. I think he's incredibly likable in that series. You would like. I guess the question I'd ask you, if you've read the Black Legion series, the third order hasn't come out yet, but if you read those first 2 books, I would ask you, would you follow Abaddon? And your answer has to be yes. You would follow that man.
He is. I've only read the first one, but he is very compelling in that. He does come over as quite a charismatic leader. So it takes the remnants of the Sons of Horus, and he also obviously takes in other legions as well and pulls them all together and brings them from running away from everybody to in charge. And I think people do sort of dismiss him as 13 Black Crusades, but I know that, and he's failed. But if you think about it, that each one he did gain a little bit. And obviously in Orcs of Omen, that was a big chaos win at the end of the day.
And it's one of those things, like, you have to remember, the Great Rift is massive. Like, this is a massive change to the galaxy. Like, so the 13 Black Crusades isn't just like the loss of Cadia. The galaxy is split into 2. One of the things you can do with Blackstone is negatively charge it. So, as positively charge it. So you have positively, negatively charged Blackstone. And the Necrons use it to kind of reduce the warp's impact on reality. Abaddon can use it to spread the warp into the real space around Terra. And if he does this, it's game over. So there is all this stuff about the Emperor growing more powerful, and that is true. But at the same time, the Imperium is very nearly lost in practical terms. And the Vashdor, honestly, the problem that they have is delaying Abaddon's victory, because Abaddon is almost assured victory at this point.
So a bit more casual questions. When you're not making YouTube videos, painting minis, playing games, what else do you like to do to switch off, relax, chill out?
I do a lot of what not too much. I'll probably go to the pub after this and see my lovely girlfriend. And I have a cat that I'm sadly obsessed with. But I kind of throw myself into the videos quite a lot now, to be honest with you. So it's been like a whirlwind thing, and it's like the best job ever. But one of the things about it is I love to do it, so I never really stop. I feel like nowadays, but I do need to, I'm ever one of those people that's like, to get back in the gym.
So when you are in the pub with your lovely other half, what is your crisp of choice?
Crisp? I don't know. To be honest, I never order crisps in the pub. And I'd probably just order chips, I'll be honest with you.
But crisps in general, then. I was just trying to do a clever link there.
A prawn cocktail, I would say. A prawn cocktail. It just shouldn't exist, but I'd like it. Yeah.
Yeah. I was starting to look like an absolute hobo, so I had to get it all cut off. I'll be honest, you've answered a lot of my questions that I was spamming in the chat. I feel that the lore chat has dominated tonight, and that's obviously what you're known for. We're not going to rob you of the viewing public of the opportunity to ask you questions about it. But getting to know the person, for me, is a big deal. And I know you commented on your Gene Stealer cults before. Having listened to the Conclave myself, but knowing some people may be new and may not have, what was the inspiration for all of that stuff?
Yeah. So they were like my lockdown army. And I thought about what I would do for them for a long time. And I wanted to do like an Agri-World themed army. Agri-Worlds are like very common in the Imperium, and we never really visit them. So I thought it'd be really cool. And like weirdly, one of the most produced produces of the Imperium for food is actually like wheat. So I thought it would be quite cool to have kind of an Agri-World based thing. And it was one of those things, you ever have an idea for a faction, just kind of all kind of like clips together of like smallish conversions that I could make, and then it would all work. But I'm not ambitious enough to attempt a massive conversion project. And I also wanted it to be the case that if I added new stuff to it, it wouldn't look out of place. But like I did things like all my bases are like farming themed bases, and then like my aberrants have scythes, all of my neophytes have like farmers caps. What else did I do? Yeah, lots of like farming type weapons, all that kind of thing. Yeah, so and a lot of it just kind of works quite naturally. So like you probably would have rock breaking equipment on a farm in the 41st millennium, and you would have people riding dirt bikes and all that kind of thing. It actually just fits really well. So it all kind of just kind of came together, and it's probably my most converted of armies.
And just thinking, like you touched on there with like agri-worlds, it's something that always fascinates me is that whenever you see them putting the books out and putting the lore out, it's always hive worlds, civilized worlds, a lot of these really sort of atypical futuristic tropes. You've also got in the lore there like the feudal worlds and various other things like that, like just that don't get touched on too much. What do you feel that would really stand out to you as a book reader? That if they really dived into the settings, what would make a really interesting sort of world to build a story around?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if I was going to choose a world, I would love to choose a world on like the edge of the Imperium. So, like we spoke about Caliban earlier, for the Dark Angels. There's all these kind of like worlds that end up in these kind of really crazy places because during the age of technology they were hyper specialized, and as soon as the Empire of Mankind fell apart, the first one, they ended up devolving into like crazy states. And places like Caliban have like some technology, but not all of it. And so I quite like the idea of I just love these kind of worlds that are like semi-technologically adapted, like kind of like Horizon Zero Dawn type things, if you know that game. Like I love that kind of stuff. So I think if I was going to write something, I'd love to set a book there. That'd be crazy.
And I'll tell you what, I'll make this my last question because I know I've joined late. I know obviously everyone's been moving on. I'll pass over to whoever's next. What to you, having done all your research, is the cringiest thing that you've read that they've put out? Obviously, there's a lot that stands out that is really good, it really stands out, it's really like, I can't think of the way to sort of put it, but what sort of stands out that you read and you just think, oh, Jesus, did they actually do that? Ugh.
So like the one that makes me laugh, the one that I kind of like was I rolled my eyes at was, and this by no means terrible, and it's like genuinely got some good parts to the book, but there's a story called the book called Wolf Time I mentioned earlier, and the funny thing about that is that if you've heard of the Space Wolves, you'll know what the Wolf Time is. The Wolf Time is this time, in prophesized time, when Lehman Russ will return to the Space Wolves in their like darkest hour. Fantastic idea. They wrote a book called Wolf Time. It is nothing to do with the Wolf Time. Like it's just they have like a couple of conversations around like, is it currently the Wolf Time? No. Okay. Will it be the Wolf Time in the future? Maybe. Okay. Well, that's always the situation. It's never not been that for 10,000 years. So like they wrote that book and I was just kind of like, what was the point? Like it was like it's just clickbait. It was just trying to get you to buy the book. And I was like, come on, you could have just slapped Logan Grimnar on the cover and people would have bought it. Like you're fine. But I don't know why they did that. Because at some point when Lehman Russ returns, you would call that book Wolf Time. Now they can't do that because they've already used the name. That's very odd.
So they'll end up having to call it Wolf Time 2 Lehman Russ Boogaloo or something like that.
Yeah, but Wolf Time, no, really, it's the Wolf Time. It will be the name of the book.
This is the Wolf Time. I want to follow on from that a little bit. I don't know how far back your reading goes. This is probably, judging the fact that you said you were 8 when the Lord of the Rings game came out, I'm pretty sure this is before you were born. Did you ever read any of the Watson books, Inquisitor or Space Marine? Just out of curiosity, of cringe books.
So, like weirdly, like in researching videos, I might have read a couple of them, but I don't think I've ever sat down and read them all. Yeah,
they have a Colexis assassin that turns into a gene stealer, and he has sex with it.
Yeah. Older 40k lore goes hard at times.
This is the question that gets Dunk riled up now. It's not a bad question. It's just basically a musical taste question. Beatles Do you love them? Do you hate them?
Oh, I love the Beatles, man. I can't
Yeah.
like the Beatles. Yeah.
And you can see from Doug's
You don't
reaction
like
on the camera.
You don't like the Beatles.
I hate them, man. They're overrated, man.
Even some
Honestly.
of the Beatles songs today, you listen to like Hey Jude, and you're like, that is a good song. Like, it's just a good song. Like, yeah.
Oh, well, because the song's about his dad leaving his mum and don't beat the son. That's a depressing song, man. Honestly, I'm going to write a song about your pain, and that was it McCartney that wrote that? That is a horrible song. I just mad.
So I'm now going to hand you over to Dunk now. I've wound him up. I purely asked that question because I knew if you said you loved them, Dunk could go up.
I know, you're fine. So, I've got one more kind of two more questions. One that we've already discussed privately, and another one that I was watching a video. Now, I'm not 100% sure if it was you that touched on this or somebody else. Definitely wasn't Lewitton. It might have been some American guy, not West Hammer, but somebody else. So, I was watching a video. It says that all the Alpha Legion Marines, none of them have been alive since the Horus Heresy because they never went into the warp. Where do you see the Alpha Legion fitting now if they've never, because apparently they never went into the warp, so all the Alpha Legion Marines that are kicking about now are kind of like Marines, like Space Marines, the loyalist Space Marines. Where do you see the Alpha Legion fitting in? Because apparently they're the good guys.
Well, the Alpha Legion splinter. So some of them will go into the war, some of them won't do it. So the concept of like loyalist Alpha Legion is definitely Alpha Legion. Bloodlines in the heresy in the first End of the Death is about Inko Pek and the Alpha Legion that are situated under the Imperial Palace. Now, we don't know what happens to them, but by the end of the Siege of Terror, they're still there. So in theory, there could well be all these Alpha Legionnaires under the Imperial Palace 10,000 years later. Their loyalty is yet to be determined because you have to know the right code words. But it's definitely a massive plot point, and we still don't know what is going to happen to. I'm going to say Omegon, but technically there's like a switch. But for the Omegon versus Killerman fight, we don't know how they're going to treat that because Alfarius is very much treated as dead by the writers. Like Black Library have come out and said that he's dead. I will say that might not last because new writers might come in and management might make requests and things change. But for Omegon, it's yet to be decided whether because they could write that book in the Scouring to make it very clearly implied that Omegon secretly survives. But by the old law, he dies. So Omegon might kick around.
And my second to last question before I hand you over to Casey quickly before Love Island. We discussed this privately when I first asked you to come on, and it was really about Terminators back in the Horus Heresy and how they knew what ones would remain loyal and what ones didn't remain loyal. And for me, I would love for Black Library to maybe expand on that a bit or have a wee bit more lore, because I think it was easy enough to find out what Marines would stay loyal. But if you've got a dreadnought, how would you know they would have stayed loyal? What's your take on like dreadnoughts from like the Horus Heresy, especially the traitorous legions?
Sorry, I think you cut out for me a little bit there. Would you mean around like the Istvan, before the Istvan 3 massacre?
Yeah. I know we've got that Emperor's Children dreadnought who stayed loyal, but what about the other ones for like the Underworld and that?
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of just down to the Primarch in the end. They and senior members of the Legion, they kind of make the decisions. Overwhelmingly, the people. Actually, it varies amongst the legions, but they're pretty confident that the majority of them will follow their Primarch because they're kind of genetically and they've been socially conditioned to do so. But the ones that get sent down on Istvan 3 it's by the direction of the Primarch, and they do get it wrong at times. We see with like Lucius, for example. It's not an exact science. It's one of the reasons it's such a brutal sequence.
And last question, and it's more about your lovely girlfriend. Is she into the hobby as much as you are? Does she dabble in it, or does she just leave that to yourself?
No, she doesn't really have an interest in it. I'll be honest with you. I tried once. You know, I tell you, it was quite funny actually. So I was painting a tower ethereal, and she said like, "Oh, I'd love to like try painting one at some point." And I was like, "Oh, actually, this is kind of a perfect model because an ethereal, you know, they're kind of external to the cast, to the set world a lot of the time, so they could have a different scheme." So I was like, you know what? I'll paint like the skin and like the nails and all that kind of thing, and then you can kind of just go in on the armor and paint it however you want it. And so I give her the model and whatever paint. And I come back, and she's not painted any of the blank bits that I left. She's painted over all the bits I had to paint it. So I was like, okay, apparently I was not clear enough. So yeah, I have this one tower ethereal with like pink nails and like rather extravagant hair.
I think that's just my other half doesn't paint, but she complains that all of my stuff's too serious looking. There's not enough pinks and there's not enough big hair and bouffontness about them all. So don't worry, you're not alone there.
There's a guy on Yodcast called, funny enough, called Duncan, and he's done a pink Tower army. And you can, off some illicit websites, get Sexy Town. So he's put Sexy Town on all the faces.
What's wrong with it?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that is
pink just reminded me of it.
Yeah. No, I would like to do one army one day that's just like incredibly bright. I might do that for the Bretonians, even do something like a very vibrant purple and black scheme, something like that. You know.
So I'm going to shoot in with one last question.
Sure.
And I think this will be it from me altogether. Obviously, with your channel, all the other lore video masters out there, you're competing almost against them in a way. Do you feel that when you're doing your research and you're thinking, right, this is a great subject, I'm going to do it, are you having to also counter research that, you know, other guys haven't done it, or you want to put your own spin on it? And also, as a follow-on to that, where do you see your channel going?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. And it is something I've thought about quite a bit, because in truth is that some channels do compete, but your channel shouldn't compete, if that makes sense. So there are some channels that do this really, really well. So two, I would say, are Warrior Tier and Pancreas No Work. These are channels. So Warrior Tier do these incredibly dramatic tellings of, and do voice acting and incredibly well edited and great music for their tellings of certain events. And they write all the lore themselves and their own versions of lore. And Pancreas No Work is Colin, who's a really nice guy, and he's a very, very funny, you know, he's a really funny guy, American guy. And the reason I said it was a great examples are because they don't compete with anybody. Because even if you are a massive Grey Knight fan and you've read everything on the Grey Knights and you know them back to front, every book they've ever been in, you would still watch their videos because Collins is so funny. You're still getting something out of it, and Warrior Tears is so entertaining. And that's something that I've thought about quite a lot, because one of the things I kind of fear about with my channel is that all I'm doing is just like delivering the lore. And although that sounds like the description of a lore channel, at the same time, you should add more to that, so that even if somebody is already familiar with this story or has already seen it on another channel, they'll still check out yours because they're like, oh, I'd love to see his take. I'd love to see how he'd handle this. So I guess, yeah, I've been trying to do more than that. So like, weirdly, so I've been trying to do, I guess a bit more voice acty quite stuff. I've been putting my face in videos a lot more to kind of build up more of a personality. I've been doing live streaming to like build an audience in that respect. And that side of things has really, I think it's actually really important. And especially with like AI becoming this big thing on the internet, you know, you kind of have to, because with, you know, if all you do is, you know, like back in the day, a lot of the channels are just kind of like, you know, based off how it goes on the wiki and that kind of thing. And it's like, well, you know, the AI channels will get out 5 times the videos that you do in a week. So like, you're just not gonna be able to compete, and they'll use, you know, Ryan Reynolds' voice or whatever. So it's, in terms of the direction of the channel, I guess that's in terms of finding like my future, that's kind of where it goes. I've been doing a lot of live streaming stuff, and I think that's actually been really good, because one of the things that I think I actually do bring to the table for a law channel is, as I said, I'm not based off I don't just read the wiki, and I actually was like a massive 40k fan first. Most law YouTube channels were just wanted to be YouTubers, found a niche in 40k, and then went down that route. Whereas I'd actually read books first. And so the reason I can do the live streaming, and the reason I don't really think anyone else does, is because it's very hard. It's very hard if someone goes like, oh, ask about, Mechanicum. You're like, cool, yeah, I haven't read that book in 7 years or whatever. But like most people just haven't got the depth of knowledge. And so that kind of thing has allowed me to kind of build a little niche. And in terms of my main videos, I've been trying to add in, more kind of like links between novels and then reading out the passages, and trying to pick topics that I know I can talk really well on. So it's I guess and it's really tough because trying to make it so that ultimately I want it to be the case that even if someone knows the topic really well, even if they know everything about the Men of Iron, they might be like, oh, I'd be interested to see what Sandman said on this, because this is one of the topics that I like. But yeah.
Just a quick one before I get sent it over to Dunk for sign-off, because I'm just watching the time for that Love Island 9 o'clock kickoff. Not for me, for Dunk. We haven't really gone into the Tau bit, because obviously you're a Tau fan. How do you see the Tau progressing? Because obviously there's the thing where if the Imperium put their mind to it, they're that big, they could just wipe the Tau out. And obviously there's also the discussion about the watercast. Oh, no, sorry, the aircast. They're in charge. First of all, they seem quite friendly, and now it looks like they may be trying to like manipulate people and brainwash people. How do you see their story going forward?
So I think the story is going to be focused around just the students of Pure Tide. Weirdly, the ethereal cast that runs the Tau Empire, they've kind of been pushed back. The leader of the ethereal cast was Orn Var, and Orn Var, you might have heard, died like a few editions ago. And so whenever you see Orn Var in the novels, he's actually an AI, like in a hologram. So with that, there's no kind of like main ethereal to replace him in the books or anything like that. They might work towards that, but that's not a thing currently. But the main focus in the novels are the 3 students of Pure Tide. Shadow Sun had a book very recently, and her book was fascinating because it revisits this idea of the Tau having a god. So the Tau race technically can't like create gods like humanity can or the Eldar can, because the Tau have very small souls. And so with such a small reflection in the warp, they don't have the psychic impact that the human race does or the Eldar do. However, the auxiliaries that they work with, they do have strong psychic reflections in the warp, and so weirdly the belief of the auxiliaries in the greater good has created this kind of Tau god, and this god has appeared in multiple books now, which was a bit of a surprise because they introduced in a book called War of Secrets. However, I thought that was going to be like a casual thing that they would be like, oh, this is a fun idea, and then it never comes up again. That kind of stuff happens all the time in 40k, but now she's actually a thing, and she's working for the benefit of the Tau, and she seems to be very effective at fighting against Nurgle, for example. So that's Shadowson's plot line going forward. And I would say there's like the potential for another Tau civil war, because there is the previous sphere of expansion was the fourth sphere. And it's a long story, but essentially as they try to take a shortcut by shooting the warp, it goes terribly. The sphere, the fleet gets lost in the warp, and they get devoured by demons. They end up getting saved by this Tau god, who ends up creating a way of exiting the warp for them, and they end up in another part of the galaxy. When this happens, the Tau race realize that it's the auxiliaries who created this horrific being, and even though it's a god of the Tau, they're kind of terrified of it. They think it's like this evil idea, and so they end up butchering all their auxiliaries. And this is kind of kept very secret, but they're like, these members of the Tau race are incredibly racist and hate the auxiliaries that they work with. And they're still around in 40k, and they've been kind of like reintroduced to the main Tau force in the 5th sphere expansion. However, their commander, Commander Surestrike, is very kind of, very aggressive character, and it looks like he might come to blows with Shadow Sun at some point. So, sorry, so that's Shadow Sun storyline. You got the Farsight storyline, which we saw a bit of in Arcs of Omen. He generally wants to be left alone, but he's such a popular character. We're going to see more of him. Zeech and Korn are both vying for fast sights. That's going to come up in the future again, I've no doubt. But also, yeah, he'll have some sort of plot points in the future. And the final student of Puretide is called Case, who we also see in War of Secrets, who's kind of like a living weapon, think like Serenity from Firefly, but without the psychicness. And incredibly devastating Tau commander, operates on his own, can take on like a chapter of Space Marines all by himself. He's an absolute monster. He actually gets free in the book War of Secrets, and at some point they will bring his character back in, because the plot line around the Students of Puretide is very long, and we find out little bits about Farsight, Shadowsun, and Case in each book and their relationship. What we know is that they had like a Talisera, which is kind of like a Tau marriage between the three of them, and it falls apart at some point. We don't know exactly what happened, but we will find out what happens in one of the future books. Sorry, that's quite a lot.
Yeah, man, it's fascinating to hear you with your depth of knowledge of like the Warhammer 40k and all the different factions, not just Space Marines, but like everybody. When it's
right, Eldar, I'm terrible.
So I would just like to say thanks very much for coming on. I've still got a ton of questions I'd love to ask you, and hopefully we can try and get you back on in the future so we can ask you even more questions about the most obscure lore that you'll probably end up knowing. But for anybody who doesn't know where to find you, where can they find you so they can grab your content?
Yeah. So on YouTube, I am Sandman of Terror. I think, on Instagram as well. You can find me there.
Just want to say thanks again for coming on. Simon Casey, do you have any parting words?
No, just reiterating what you said, really, Duncan. I think if it wasn't for Love Island, I could, and obviously your good lady waiting for you in the pub, I could have happily talked to you for hours, because it's really good to see someone who's not just doing the YouTube thing. You obviously you've got a passion for it. It's infectious. And the more you talk about lore, the more I want to talk about lore. So it's great to have you on. And like Dunk said, we'd love to get you back.
Oh, well, yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Tracy?
Nothing for me. Apologies that I wasn't able to get into the first video. Don't know why. Maybe it's just that Instagram hates me. At least I did ask the questions I was hoping for. And thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Again, Sam, thanks for coming on. Had an absolutely fantastic time. This will be uploaded on YouTube, hopefully tomorrow with my son, and I'll send you the link so you can steal or cut or whatever you need from it as well. On Wednesday, folks, we're back with Leafy Decays, and then the next Sunday we have Front Row Fire. I think that's his name. Keep forgetting. Thanks again for coming on. What's that?
Cheers, thank you.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Cheers, guys.
Have a lovely rest of your night. Enjoy the pub. Cheers, folks.
Bye.
Cheers, guys. Have a good one.